Well, hello, thanks for joining me today. See how far we get today with what I want to do. First of all, thanks, genuinely thank you for joining me. I really appreciate that people take time to watch the video. Someone left a message asking me, can they pay money to me to thank me for doing this? That's absolutely not necessary. I really appreciate the gesture. That's absolutely not necessary. If people are interested in taking time to watch the videos, then that's absolutely, my gratitude is enormous for that. That's absolutely payment enough. It's about promoting Chinese wushu. Mate, are you going to get that fly? Or shall I get it? Now there's two. I've split it in half, you see. It's boiling hot here. We've got flies flying in through the window. It's not that the place is full of garbage or anything. Well, some people say that I'm full of garbage, so all the more reason to be really thankful that anyone would take time to listen to me and what I say. And that brings me on to the next thing that I've seen, which is someone talking about, there's this thing, Wang Xiaojai says, don't learn too many techniques, like it's quite overwhelming in a chaotic situation. You want to think about, you want to kind of have basics, and it's like everything Wang Xiaojai says, it's contradictory, and he contradicts himself as well over this. He makes a point about meeting people at a higher level, and then you need higher technical level to be able to be, not just higher quintessence movement principles. He makes the very specific point that if someone's technically much higher level, then you need more techniques or more technical knowledge to be able to deal with that. And that's a historical process that's going on. But also there's something deeper. There's something deeper around this. And it's what I've been getting across all the time throughout this series. And if I'm lucky enough, I can do an intermediate series and an advanced series as well, where we can really explore this in more depth. It depends what you mean by techniques, doesn't it? Like, if we say, the core things that we've been looking at throughout this introductory series, like open, close, rise, sink, as ways of forming configurations, and that those configurations are then broken down on another level in terms of Hun Yuan Li, omnidirectional force, and then the principle of Fa Li, which is basically just, you're here and you want to move a small amount. How do you maximize the power that you can deliver moving that small amount? Something we might call structural expansion, but it also works like the other way, where structural contraction. Just a short movement, how do you maximize power in doing that? Put those things together, and then you can kind of add on any technique that you want to that. So in that sense, well, there's 4 techniques. You can say that's 4 techniques, and then they can just be changed into anything: a push, a punch, an elbow, a kick, a headbutt, shoulder strike, hip strike, whatever you can think of. They all just emerge from those 4, if you want to call those techniques. I don't call them techniques, I call them contexts. There are 4 contexts that we use to structure configurations, and I said before, shouldn't confuse it with Hun Yuan Li, which is the way that the body is fluidly interlinked together to form a whole structure, and that uses contradictory force to create this effect of sudden structural expansion. Imagine you just want to move your whole body out 1 inch, and you want to maximize as much power as possible, and you want to hit at a certain point, and that's what we call, haven't got too deeply into this, but we've talked about the idea of skewing a configuration, and the way that you skew, we could say simply lean, that allows you to transmit force to a particular point. So one good example of that is Yao Chen Rong, who has a very long cross. He really skews his cross forward. This is what we call a skew the cross forwards, and that it creates a much bigger movement as well, which also adds power into it, and it's skewed very far forwards. And then you've got to ask yourself, do you think that's right just because Yao Chen Rong does it like that? Do you think it's not open to question? And this is kind of the inertia of the Yiquan movement at the moment, where people just can't get past someone's name, and it's like, well, I can't criticise them. Well, of course you can criticise them. It's scientific, like, actually it's too long. Something else he does as well is he has his hand too far close into his throat like this, which can easily, if it gets hit, it'll just hit into his throat. That's just a scientific fact. And if you think that like you can't say that, then I'm telling you, you can. And it's so long, I mean, there's videos of me doing it sparring all the time, where if you do a long cross like that, I can't, you know, it depends on your level, but catch your cross and pull you off balance. I can do it to some people, can't do it to others, or I'll have to be very, very lucky. It's too long. It's too, unless it's just a one-off, but to do it as your standard, it's too long. So my cross is much more lift up on the back leg. Anyway, it's the same configuration, but it's skewed forward with Yao Cheng Rong, and it's skewed back with, like it's skewed back much more with Yao Cheng Guang, for example. So it's quite an interesting comparison. These are all, you know, where's the technique? What's the technique? Is the technique the art of the configuration and the way that configuration is stacked and skewed? Or is the technique the cross? And what do you mean by that? Because the configuration itself can be changed to an elbow, to a palm, uppercut, overhand, eye poke, or, you know, shovel hook. Which is the technique? And that's absolutely one of the ways of thinking about what Wang Xianzhai is talking about, because you can say, we've stacked the posture, it's all based around the quintessence principles of Wushu. We're using Bao, this embrace posture. We're going to release force in a very short space. We've got all our structure is correct. And our question then is, what is the technique? So if you say, well, I could punch here or I could elbow here, is that two techniques? Like, in one way of thinking about it, it's two techniques. In another way of thinking about it, it's exactly the same quintessence principle of Wushu. I just stack the configuration differently to change it into something else. What if I change it to a shovel hook? Is that now 3 techniques? Uppercut 4, overhand 5, eye poke 6, push 7, chop out with the hammers 8. Infinite. There's an infinite number of possible techniques. Which is the technique? Is it one technique? In this case, close. The hips coming close together. Close. Is it one technique, or is it 10,000 techniques? And everything in each one is contradictory. If it's not, I said before, if it's not contradictory, then you've got to double check whether you think it really is an each one concept at all, because they're pretty much all highly contradictory like this. And it's a dialectical way of thinking that really opens your mind and makes you think differently. So not to get dragged into all this culture war stuff around truth. What is truth? And, you know, like who promotes truth, who doesn't promote truth. It's a different philosophical paradigm where the idea isn't about truth, the idea is about insight and understanding that the same thing can be contradictory but true. So all of these can be techniques. So you can, you know, add up 50 or 100 different techniques from this very simple closed posture, or this can be the technique, the single technique. So a couple of things I've seen around this, and one of them was just someone trying to get at this idea and try and explain it. And something else, someone said something about that, you know, the Tao is one thing that runs through everything, and that understanding multiple techniques is very, very confusing. And yeah, that's okay. And there's a really important conceptual difference, for example, between Jeet Kune Do and Yiquan, which I've talked about before. Yiquan has a core body movement concept, whereas Jeet Kune Do doesn't. That's why a lot of people in Jeet Kune Do just kind of copied Bruce Lee's movement, which is not what Bruce Lee wanted. And it's also why, you know, Jeet Kune Do is supposed to be like the style that ends all styles. I'm not criticising Jeet Kune Do. I've trained with really awesome Jeet Kune Do people. But conceptually, you know, it's an undeniable fact that the style that was supposed to get rid of styles, in many cases, you know, you end up wearing a t-shirt with, you know, 15 different styles on that you've learned, 15 totally different movement paradigms that you learn. That isn't what Bruce Lee was getting at. So that's an entirely different way of thinking about it than having a core body movement concept, like, for example, here's close, that you can then change into different. And so someone could say, like, you know, you're doing an overhand, someone could say, well, in our style we do it palm like this, or we do it like this, or we do it like this. We stick a knuckle out, stick 2 fingers out, whatever it is, you can maintain the same body movement posture whilst changing, you know, the superficial attachments at the end of the quintessence structure, if you want to phrase it like that. That's a entirely different movement concept. So it's not an illegitimate argument to make people think about the single thing that runs through it, as Guo Yunshen said. The core movement principles. However, there's another side to that coin, and that's that those people who say that, they also have to be able to demonstrate quintessence movement principles, and the only way to do that is in an actual technique. And once they do that, once they've got a technique, then they're in the world of techniques, then they're in the world of scientific discussion about, can you use those techniques for a start? Can you demonstrate quintessence movement principles in those techniques? If one thing runs through the 10,000 things, then you should be able to do one thing. One of those 10,000 things should contain quintessence movement principles. They won't all be there in the same ratio, you know. If it's down, it's not rise, you know. If it's sink, it's not rise. If it's down, it's not up, whichever phrase you want to use. They're in a different ratio for different postures, but nevertheless, those quintessence movement principles should be demonstrable. You should be able to demonstrate them. And then you should be able to demonstrate them, not just postures, because it's easy to go and learn from someone and learn some postures, their practical application, because what's actually being argued is a theory that to be practically useful, don't confuse yourself with lots and lots of different techniques. You should be able to, well, I think in many cases, like the person who was saying this, I don't think they really were making the same argument as me, that there's quintessence movement principles that you can add on any posture to. And the reason I say that is that most of these things, when you hear something like that, it's very rarely like if I do it. Like, you can go and see me sparring doing it, you can see me hitting a bag with power doing it, you can see me doing it slow, you can see me doing it shadow boxing, you can see the principles that I talked about in practical use. When I hear someone just kind of making it doesn't come across as a positive to me, it doesn't come across as a medium of enlightenment to others, it comes across as a criticism of others, which is absolutely fine as long as you can support that criticism. So in most cases it never is supported, so to me that's very problematic, and it makes me think it's just kind of point scoring. You know, people making passive aggressive comments about other people's practice, is it genuinely helping other people? No. You can demonstrate something in a photograph, but you're saying something bigger. You're saying like, well, I've got an overall concept around practical use, practical fight training here, where it's based on this idea of Wang Shen Zhai, that we don't have too many techniques, and I've interpreted that as, you know, I've got like X amount of, you know, like people like to do in Yiquan, they like to over-scientize it and say there's X amount of fists and there's X amount of palms. Saw someone the other day saying there's 70 zhuangs, exactly 70. Well, that's not what Yao Zhongzun says, it's not what Wang Shen Zhai says. So you can create any zhuang, particularly for a medical condition, you can create any zhuang. People liking to scientize it, again, this leads away from the wonderful, beautiful thing of exploration and kind of the infinitude of the infinite curriculum, all these different things you can, the infinite unfolding of the system itself, which makes it completely different to anything else. And anyway, then they say like, well, you know, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, 5, 6 postures or something like that, and I just went, well, yeah, okay. A boxer says that, pro boxer says that, yeah, that absolutely does work in pro boxing. Carries over a lot into MMA, but it doesn't carry over completely into MMA, as we know. We know that, you know, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu kind of had this idea early on, dominated MMA, doesn't dominate MMA in the same way anymore, and certainly not that old style Jiu-Jitsu. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu isn't dominating in the same way. So we know, just like Wang Shen Zhai said, what he said was, if you meet a naughty monkey, you need to know more techniques. So monkeys have never been naughtier. So what people who say that, what people who hold on to that are saying is, I know like a handful of techniques, and this makes me effective. This is all you need. This is all you need, and that's not true. So it's empirically not true anyway. But they can't demonstrate it either, so what's the point? You know, why are they saying it? It's point scoring against other people with kind of passive aggressive pseudo Taoism. That's what I'm getting at. It's not just one person. I've seen a few people who talk like that. And then the truth though, the truth that we want to get at, like every every true thing is like got its kind of counterfeit. Because anything that's true, you can also kind of make a bullshit interpretation of. That's why this isn't about truth. That's why it's about insight. Here's the truth isn't that you only need 6 techniques. It's not about truth. It's about insight. The insight is that actually the quintessence movement principles are very simple. There's only a few core concepts, and that's why I've taught like this throughout this series. You don't need to start just by practicing Zhanzhuang. You can incorporate Zhanzhuang as you go along. It's more important in many ways to understand these core quintessence movement principles. What Zhanzhuang does is it's a basic training exercise which helps you harness and utilize those core movement principles. The key ones that we've looked at being open, close, up, down. Those core techniques, you can even call them methods if you want, but that's problematic because method tends to lead you away conceptually from practical application. So we can call them, what I call them is contexts, the 4 contexts around which quintessence movement principles are expressed physically through the construction of a configuration, what we call stacking a configuration. The way that a configuration is stacked, and it contains all the quintessence principles of Wushu that we need up to this stage. Bow, this embrace posture, the concept of Fa Li, which again, don't think about it as, I saw someone had asked a question, what is Fa Li? And then 1,000,001 people have got an answer ranging from, well, here's me moving fast to here's a boxer hitting with power and it's all Fa Li. But don't think about it like that. Think about it as a simple principle that you want to make the smallest movement possible for the most power possible within the reality context of the fight. Think of it as a principle like that, and then think about what are the expressions of that principle. One is our key concept of structural expansion. That's the most important idea in Yiquan in terms of Fa Li. And you think of that very simply as you're in a posture, you want to make a small movement, you want to expand the whole body, or it can be contraction as well, so the phrase structural expansion can be a little bit misleading. As long as the whole body moves, let's say, what's that, about 5 centimetres, and how much power can you generate from that movement? Simple as that. And that leads you into then the reason why we're doing all this, developing this structural movement and the ability to use bow in structural formats and explosive movement, and why we're doing it slow, why are we cultivating this? Why are we cultivating this kind of movement? Why do we do this kind of movement? Why do we use articulated movement? To get more volume in that, very short. It's a very short movement. And then that then just unfolds in the infinite curriculum into different, more sophisticated, using spiral force and waves and openings and just a range of different concepts, but they're all based on really simple principles. So yeah, you don't need that many techniques, but there again, you do. And that again is a contradiction, because it's the essential contradiction that's the engine. It's like the nuclear driver of each one, that there's quintessence movement principles and there's fight training and practice, and these are in dialectical relationship all the time. So even if you're learning a new technique, even if it's come from another martial art or something like that, it's drawn into the gravity well of quintessence movement principles and our structural movement and the use of bow and this embrace rounded posture that allows us to do these things like structural expansion, contraction, to create this Fa Li effects. And then, as we've talked about multiple times, how do you change into doing combinations and things like that? It becomes quite complicated. It becomes more sophisticated. It becomes more, not complicated, it becomes more sophisticated, but it's all body knowledge, and it all links into and unfolds from really simple things, and eventually packs back up just into this posture, which is just wonderful. And then this packs up and folds back into your intent, and then that unfolds again because your intent is a social product. That's why Yiquan is a philosophy as well as and a social science as well as a physical practice, because you were trained how to move, and you've got to go back and you've got to unpack how that happened, and you've got to reclaim it, and you've got to reclaim you've got to understand, as I've said before, that you are the master. You already mastered movement, but that movement was given to you by a society as a kind of form of physical repression, and you've got to, by recognising that you already are the master, that you already mastered it once, you already are the master of your own movement, you've just got to learn to do that again, but with a different paradigm. That's a whole other thing, and it's not the reason why Wang Xiangjai hated the term master, the title master. He despised it, and he despised the master-student relationship as well, that formalised master-student relationship. It's wicked. It's wickedness that people have resurrected that and call themselves by these titles. It's wicked. It's wickedness. Anyway, the point is recognising that you are already the master. And it's a totally different, totally different way of thinking about it. Contradictory. Well, the beginner student is already the master. And that's what Wang Xiangjai said. You already know everything you need to know. So it's a little bit of a conceptual upgrade that I think we need to start introducing now, here and there. And get on to doing the intermediary course, then more, and then advanced course more. Like just kind of understanding things conceptually makes all the difference. It can radically change your physical level. That's also a concept that people have to get. That's enough talking about that today. Okay, one love for that. I'll see you over in the next one.